Hey guys, and welcome to this video. In this video, we're going to talk about the rest of Unit 3 lessons. Now, 9.3, upper and lower bounds. In 9.3, we're going to talk about upper and lower bounds and how to find them from a question, okay? First, let's talk about some questions related to the same thing. For example, here, round these numbers to the nearest 100. Now, the nearest 100, it means this number. This is the hundreds. So the nearest hundred is going to be very good. Look at the number before it, which is five. This means that the five is big. It will make the two the three. So the answer is 300, like this. The nearest hundred is 300. Now, one decimal place. One decimal place means what? Very good. One decimal place, it means they need one decimal number in the answer. This means you a rectangle like this. This is the first decimal place or one decimal place. Now you look at the number after the decimal place, or the first decimal place, which is the 9. Now the 9 is big. This means that the answer should add 1 here. And the answer should be, very good, 253.1. And this is how you answer a question like this. The rest are the same, two decimal places. Let's take a look. Two decimal places. Let's remove this. Let's take a look. Nearest 10 and two decimal places. So for the nearest 10, let's zoom out a little bit. Yes. For the nearest 10, this is the nearest, this is the 10, which is 5. Now we look at the number after the 10, which is the 3. The 3 is smaller than the 5. It means it will be removed and we'll put 0 instead of it. That's it. So the nearest 10 will be 250, like this. And then the last one, the nearest two decimal places or for two decimal places. Now, rounding for two decimal places, same idea as one decimal place, but it means we need two decimal places in the answer. So basically, we take a rectangle like this, we include the number and two decimal numbers inside the box or the rectangle. Then we look at the number after, which is the 9. The 9 is big, it means it will add 1 here. This means that this 9 will become a 10. So we have a 0 and 1 here. And this 1 will come here as 1, and the rest will be the same. So the final answer would be 253.10, and this is the answer of two decimal places rounding. Now let's move on to the next questions. Here we talked about some questions related to the upper and lower bound. Now we need to understand how to find the upper and lower bound. Now, basically, the questions of upper and lower bound, they will come like this. They will give you a measurement and they will tell you that this one is rounded to the nearest something. Now, first, if they give you a number after the word nearest, if they give you a number, you have to use the number. If they didn't give you a number, for example, if they give you any unit, it means the number is 1. It means the number is 1. So, for example, here, they gave us kilometers only. They didn't give us any units. It means the number that you're using is going to be 1. Okay? You use it, you do the steps, and you find the upper and lower bound. I'll explain the steps after I explain this, okay? Here, they wrote to the nearest day. This means it's 1 day, yes. Here, one decimal place. So we're going to talk about using 1 first, and then we're going to talk about decimal places. Here, they said to the nearest 10. It means you're going to use the 10. That's the idea of the numbers that you're going to use. So if it's only a unit after the word nearest, if it's a unit, it means you take 1 and do the steps of finding the upper and lower bound. If they tell you 10 meters, nearest 10 meters, it means you take the 10 instead of the 1 and you follow the steps of finding the upper and lower bound. Now, one decimal places and two decimal places, we will talk about it after we finish this. Let's first do the steps so you understand the idea. Let's take the first question here. I'll do the steps for that and you'll understand the idea. So let's cover this. As we said, first thing you do, you look at the two numbers that you have. The first number is the original one, which is 11 kilometers here. And the second number is after the word nearest or after the word two. So here they just said a unit, which is kilometer. And we said if it's any unit without any numbers, it means you're going to use the number one. Use the number one. Now, the first thing you do, you have to make sure that they are the same units. This and this, they must be the same units. If they're not the same units, come to this unit and make it the same with the other. So basically, if they're not the same units, make them the same. If they are the same units, continue with the work. Now, we made sure that they are the same units, kilometers, kilometers. Now, we're going to take the one here and divide it by two. Now, we always divide by two. We try to find the upper and lower bound. We always divide by two because the upper and lower bound are two values. That's why we divide by two. And we divide by two to try to find what? Very good. To try to find the absolute error. So 1 divided 2 is 0.5. We call this the absolute error. The absolute error. So basically, I made sure that they have the same units. And then this is a unit. So I took one. If they give me a number here, I'm going to take the number. If that's a 10, I'm going to use the 10 and divide it by 2. If that's 100, I'm going to use the 100 divided by 2. But here I have no numbers. It means I have to use 1. So dividing by 2, I got 0.5, and this is called the absolute error. Now, to find the upper and lower bound, what do I do? To find the upper bound, let's call it UP. I'm going to take the original and add the absolute error to it. So original plus absolute error. This is called the upper bound. And the lower bound equals the original minus the absolute error. This is how you find the upper and lower bound. So the original number here is what? Very good. It's 11. Now, 11, when I add it to the absolute error, it will give me the upper bound. So 11 plus 0.5 will give me 11.5 kilometers. And this is the upper bound. This is the upper bound. And then to find the lower bound, I'm going to take the original, which is 11, minus the absolute error. This will give me 10.5 kilometers. And this is called the lower bound. Lower bound. And this is how you answer a question like this. So focus on this. The word after nearest. If it's a number, you can use the number. If it's a unit, you use one. Now, here, this is the original, and this is the number that helps you to find the absolute error. First thing, you make sure that they have the same units, and then take this number, divide it by 2 to find the absolute error. Now, add the absolute error to the original, you'll get the upper bound. Subtract it from the original, you'll get the lower bound, and this is how you answer a question like this. Now, you need to understand that the upper bound and lower bound, sometimes they call them other names or other words. For example, here, sometimes they call them the maximum or the highest number or the highest measurement. You need to understand this so you understand the questions. Sometimes they tell you the maximum point or the smallest possible point, like this. Here, for example, this is the upper bound and this is the lower bound. For example, the upper bound, they call it the biggest possible actual value or the maximum value. Lower bound, they call the smallest possible value or the minimum value. So it depends on the words they're using. Sometimes they don't say maximum, sometimes they don't say upper or lower bound, so you have to focus on this. Now let's move on with the ideas. Here, let's solve the rest of the questions here. So the moon orbits the Earth every 27 days to the nearest day. Same idea, nearest day. Day is a unit. So basically, first thing I do, because day is a unit, I'm going to use number one. Now, uh, I want to make sure that they have the same units. So here we have days, days. Okay, same units. It means I can continue working with one. First thing I do, I divide it by 2, which gives me 0.25. Same idea. Here, I'll do the steps here. So first thing I do, I take the 1 divided by 2. This will give me 0.25, 0.5, which is what? Very good, the absolute error. Now I'm going to use the zero point 0.5 to find the upper and lower bound. As we said, we add it to the original to find the upper bound. So the upper bound will be what? Very good. So 27 plus 0 0.5 will be 27.5. And this is the upper bound. And 27 minus 0 0.5 will give me 26.5, which is the lower bound. And that's the whole idea of finding the upper and lower bound and the steps of finding the upper and lower bound. Now let's move on to the next one. Here, the mass of a tennis ball is 56.7 grams to one decimal place. Now, we talked about having a unit after the word nearest. Now we're going to talk about having something else, which is numbers or one decimal place, two decimal places, or significant figures. So let's cover this here in this question so you understand all the ideas. Let me cover this here because these questions are very important. Now, I'm not going to do the steps. I'm just going to tell you how to find the absolute error. The next step is adding and subtracting from the original. You already know how to do it. Now, first question here. The mass of a tennis ball is 56.7 grams to one decimal place. Now, the word one decimal place means what? Very good. One decimal place means zero point 0.1. It means zero point 0.1. Now, to do the steps of the upper and lower bound, you take the zero point 0.1 and divide it by 2. And this will give you what? This will give you 0.05. And we call this the absolute error. Very good. So if it's one decimal place, you just take zero point 0.1 divided by 2, you'll get 0.05, which is the absolute error. And then you take the absolute error, add it to the original to get the upper bound, and subtract it from the original to get the lower bound. And that's the idea of question C. Now, if the question says two decimal places, if it's two decimal places, the number will be what? Very good. 0.01. So basically, one decimal place, 0.1, two decimal places, 0.01. And you do the same steps by dividing by 2, and you'll get this number, which is 0.005, which is the absolute error. Use it, add it with the original, and subtract it with the original to find the upper and lower bound. So we need to understand that the words after the word nearest or two are very important. If they are giving you a unit, use 1. If they're giving you one decimal place, use 0.1. If they're giving you two decimal places, you use 0.01. Now, what happens if they give you a number? Very good. Same steps. You're going to use the number that they gave you and divide it by 2. So basically, let's cover this here. Just make sure you understand the steps correctly because they are very important. So here, they gave us nearest 10 meters. So we're going to use 10. And after making sure that they have the same units, meters, now you're going to take the 10 divided by 2. And 10 divided 2 equals, very good, 5. Now, after finding the 5, which is what? Very good. It's the absolute error. Now you're going to use it with the original to find the upper and lower bound. So this is the absolute error. The original is 300. So you add it to find the upper bound. So upper bound will equal 310, 305, I'm sorry. And the lower bound, you subtract it. So it's going to be what? Very good. 295. So adding the absolute error to the original to find the upper bound and subtracting from the original to get the lower bound. And this is how you answer a question like this. So we understand if it's a unit, we use 1. If it's one decimal place, we use 0.1. If it's two decimal places, we use 0.01. If it's a number, we use the number that they gave us. Let's take a look at this question here. Now we understand the steps. We don't have to do the whole steps, okay? There were 65,000 people at a football match, rounded to the nearest thousand. A thousand is a number. It means you can use the thousand to round it, okay? Now find the upper and lower bound for the number of people. So basically, they told us to the nearest thousand. It means we're going to use thousand. So we divide it by 2 to get what? Very good. To find the absolute error. So 1000 divided 2 will equal 500. Now 500 is what? Very good. It's the absolute error. And then what do we do with the absolute error? Good job. To find the upper bound, we add it to the original. To find the lower bound, we subtract it from the original. And this is how you answer a question like this. Now, let's move on to the next questions. Same idea with all of them. Make sure that they have the same units, and then you can work out the upper and lower bound. And that's it for for the lesson and for the unit. Thank you very much for watching. See you next time.